Standing by, the Terry and Ted podcast is sponsored by Jaguar Land Rover Laval, where the luxury is unmistakably British, but nobody wears a top hat or a monocle.
Well, we've changed our clothes, but
it's about time.
I've lost track. Is this episode number 4 or?
This is number 4. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. By the way, I just saw those pants you were wearing last time around. I just saw them walking down the street by themselves.
How are you enjoying this podcast thing?
I'm enjoying
Mr.
it very
Bird?
much. Yeah,
so
it's
am I.
well, we're very lucky. I was thinking about this morning.
Yeah.
You and I both, when we started out in radio, started out in one-horse towns, right?
Yes, sir.
And you even more so than me. I was in Charlottetown, which is a small city. It's a capital city.
Yeah.
It's not big. I think there were 20,000 people when I lived there. That's where I started in radio. You started in Churchill, Manitoba.
2,200 people, not counting the polar bears.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, is that north of the Arctic Circle or
No.
south of, but not too far from?
North of the 58th parallel.
Okay,
we
so
used to say.
you could maybe not throw a rock and hit it, but if you threw a rock twice, you could hit the
Yeah.
Arctic Circle from there.
Exactly. No roads in or out. The only access was by train or plane.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was weird.
So where we are now, which is at Pantelis Comedy Studios,
Yes.
Pantelis and his team are at the top of the podcast game.
Yes.
Like we got in on the penthouse floor.
We did.
For this, and we were very lucky, and we're very grateful for that. Yeah. And we have, as our producer, we have Poseidon, who is part of the Pantelis team, and you know him from Two Drink Minimum and multiple other podcasts. And Poseidon doesn't know, but today he almost got a phone call from Terry in prison.
Oh shit! I want to hear this.
As we were driving here, we drove past Duffy's in Dorval, which is one of the dive bars to end all dive bars. I think it's fair to say that,
Yes.
with all due respect,
Yes.
it's not where the elite gather for a cocktail.
No, it's not like the lounge at the Four Seasons.
No,
it's
no.
not. And much to my surprise, because I've been out of Montreal all summer long. And I'm getting the hell out of Montreal after we're done here today, too. But I was stunned for all of the time that I've lived here, born and raised here, worked here. I said to Ted, Jesus Christ, Duffy's is still open.
Yep.
It's still happening.
And I said to Terry, 24 years of sobriety has been a pretty good run. Maybe we should, maybe it's time to throw caution to the wind.
Go over there and jump off the wagon.
Exactly, yeah. And we were saying that, Poseidon would be up here, and Terry would call him up and go, Poseidon.
Poseidon help. Ted's in jail.
Ted's dead, and I'm in prison.
Poseidon. Would you come to our rescue, Poseidon?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah? How much bail money you got on you?
You're better off calling me prior to getting arrested.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Oh Christ!
Well, I feel. First of all, I was thinking about this last night as I just before I went to sleep. I thought this is nice. You and I have been friends for a very long time, but it's been a long time since we worked together.
Yep.
And it's hard to describe to people what a great joy it is for us to sit across from each other in kibitz, which is what we used to do for a living.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's nice to do it again. So
it's good fun to do it. Just like the drive up here, we had many laughs, but it goes to another level when we're sitting in front of microphones.
Absolutely.
For whatever reason. I think it's because it's a shared experience, right?
Yeah. Today, we wanted to talk a little bit about a Montreal institution, CJAD Radio 800. Because Ted and I were actually talking about this on the drive here about English Montreal institutions.
Hang on, I'm going to subtly clear my throat.
Alrighty.
Sorry,
it's all right. And the way the audience of that radio station behaves, this is I don't want to bore you with things that you don't care about, but we think this is kind of interesting because CJAD is an institution in this town, has been for many years. It was on in my family's home every single day when giants walked the floors of that radio station. Jack Finnegan, George Balkan, Ted Blackman, Gord Sinclair. I grew up with these guys on the kitchen each and every day. Andy Barry was part of the team. There was like a long list of people that were big radio stars in Montreal when we were kids. And as the English community has shrunk in this town, and, I think it shrinks a little bit more every year, the English community hangs on for dear life to institutions that remind them of the Montreal that
the glory days.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, absolutely. Because let's be honest, I think it's a bit of a changed city.
It's a lot of a changed city, and it started in 1976, or even before 1976, in the lead up to the first time the PQ was elected, which was in 1976, and head offices left and big companies left,
and a lot of people went with them.
Yeah, there was an exodus.
My favorite commentary on that is from our great friend Tommy Schnurmacher, who often said on his show on CJAD that they should have renamed Yonge Street in Toronto René Lévesque Boulevard, because 600,000 people left the province, between 77 and whatever it is.
Yeah, the PQ is the party that built Toronto.
Yes.
And turned Toronto into the thriving metropolis that it is today and has been for many years. Montreal, I believe Montreal, it was certainly economically, it was more the engine of Canada before 1976.
Well, all the head offices were here. The bank's head offices were here.
And I think population-wise, it was bigger than Toronto. Toronto is now the fourth largest metropolitan area in North America, after New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. Yeah. Toronto's next.
And as my wife Jess has pointed out, it's an indication of how many people live in Toronto, ex-Montrealers live in Toronto, is when Tommy Schnurmacher or Aislinn do book signings in Toronto. And the lineups are around the block with people, again, looking for something from the Montreal of that era.
To get back to the point that you were getting to, Montrealers, the ones who remained and remain, hang on for dear life to their cherished institutions and guard them jealously and take ownership of them.
Ferociously.
Yeah. So what Terry and I were speaking of this morning, and we'll speak about here, was that when we were on CJAD, it was a different audience for us. The audience was new to us, and we were new to them. When we left CHOM and went to Mix 96, it was from one music station to another, even though they were different music formats. And so we brought a lot of listeners with us. I don't know how many listeners we brought to CJAD. Certainly, I don't think there was the transfer of listenership in that move that there was in the CHOM to Mix move. No. And we were introduced to an entirely new audience who didn't know us from Adam, and that was the CJD audience who'd been listening to that radio station for time or since time immemorial.
And let's just say at first, as I suspected, they weren't enthralled with our arrival.
Well, for one thing, you had to take George Balkan's place.
Yeah.
And what a thankless task that is.
And just to be clear, one thing that we did do while we were there, we did lead new people into the audience. There were, I've always believed that, when you're in your 20s and you're out every night and you're, rocking and rolling, and you listen to nothing but music, and then you get married, and then you have a child, and then you have to choose schools and maybe buy a house and everything else. That's where you become more interested in the day-to-day happenings of the world. And I really believe that we helped ease the transition to, people who were growing up with us and beginning to start their adult lives, get families, have kids and mortgages. We seem to help make the transition to news talk radio a little bit easier in those days. But what so surprised me, and I think still exists today, because I know from working within the vicinity of the CJAD studios, that the audience is fiercely loyal and very protective. And even though George Balkan took my hand, and there's a picture of me and George on the front page of the Gazette.
I remember it.
When it was announced that I was going to be his successor, and the headline was CJAD gets a new morning man. And it was George Balkan who said on his last broadcast, and that morning that they announced I would be his successor, he was the one who told the CJAD audience, this is a fine young man and a good broadcaster, and you're going to be in very, very good hands. And without his kindness and without his grace, I would have had a much, much tougher start following him. And he said to me, don't try and fill my shoes, Ter. Just put your shoes next to mine. It was advice that I never forgot, and it was very, very valuable. And I did try and adapt as quickly as I could. But what stunned me was the volume of angry mail. And it was the kind of mail that was so full of vicious attacks, personal attacks.
And keep in mind, this was, for the most part, pre-email. I mean, it was 1999, I believe, when you went over, or 98 even.
I think so.
98. And so there was email at the time, but not everybody was on email. And certainly CJD listeners of that era, who were an older crowd, they would have been the last ones to jump on the digital bandwagon, right?
And listen, I'm not complaining. I'm telling you the story.
Yeah, relating the experience.
Because I loved my time there. I really, really enjoyed it. I found it a great professional challenge, and I really, really had a nice time. Standing by, the Terry and Ted podcast, brought to you in part by my friends at Matelas Bonheur. Ted, do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions?
Please do. I'll take any attention I can get.
Okay. When you sleep at night, do you sleep on your side?
I don't know. I've never seen me sleep.
Okay. Do you prefer a big fluffy pillow or a flat pillow?
I like a flat pillow, and I like a pillow that's got that foamy stuff in it.
And do you like a firm or soft mattress?
I like a firm mattress.
Okay, these are some of the questions you're going to get asked when you walk in to a Matelas Bonheur store. They're not being personal. They're just trying to make sure that you get the best night's sleep possible. They're beautiful.
Well, they can come over and videotape me if they want.
Okay, I'll ask them if they'd like to do that.
Do they do that?
I'm not sure they do, but perhaps I can suggest a new service for them. Beautifully designed stores, and they're dedicated to one thing and one thing only, and that's a better night's sleep for you. If you're in the market for a mattress and you're looking for a better night's sleep, go visit the nice people that run this family-owned, locally owned company that's growing into quite the chain. They started out with one store on Gouin Boulevard. They now have 17 locations in the Montreal area. Find the one near you, matelasbonheur.ca. But I was telling Ted this morning, one of the things that I remember vividly is so many people who listen to the radio station had beautiful handwriting. So
because they came from generations where you weren't on your phone typing or on your computer, you wrote everything out by hand, and they had terrific penmanship.
Right, and being in the radio business for many years, you could usually tell when there was a letter that came from someone who wasn't pleased. Yeah. It usually, had really bad handwriting, or it was addressed in pencil, or, you could look at it and go, oh, Christ, this is not
no return address.
Yeah, no return address. But this mail that came in that I would read surprised me, and the end of it for me, the straw that broke the camel's back after about 4 or 5 months of these really, really wicked, not hundreds, but, I would say, 4 or 5 a week came in the beginning. Right. And this one day I thought, and I saw this beautiful handwriting on the envelope with the return address. And I thought, this looks like the kind of letter that would come from your Aunt Therese. Yeah. She
must have something lovely to say with handwriting like that.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a $5 bill in here. It's going to be great. And I opened up the letter, and it was, there was a beautiful handwritten date in the top right-hand corner, and beautifully constructed, "Dear Terry," with a comma, and the proper indentation.
Spacing, yeah.
And I began to read it, and I'll just paraphrase. I've kept the letter because it was so stunning to me. and it was with regards to your arrival at CJAD. I thought I would offer my commentary, and it never in my life have I listened to somebody who clearly is such an imbecile, who has no idea what they're doing, and da-da-da-da-da. And towards the end, she thought the perfect cherry on this Sunday was going to be, she said, I'm tired of hearing you tell everybody that you're single. It's no surprise to me that you're single. Who would want to marry a fat piece of shit like you?
Jeez.
Anyway, I thought I would let you know how I felt.
All the best, Agnes.
Yeah. And what I did was I thought I don't want to read these things anymore. So that morning I read the letter on the air.
Oh, really?
I did, and I said, I just want to address the volume of mail that's been coming in, and much of it has been very kind and supportive, and I really, really appreciate it. But I just want you to know, if you're getting ready to write me an angry letter, you'll be hard to top Agnes's letter. Let me read it to you. And I clearly edited it. I didn't, I didn't swear on the air. But you know what happened, Ted? That kind of mail stopped. It stopped that day. And
I guess it gave people pause,
I suppose. I wasn't looking for sympathy, but I just said, I'm no longer going to, respond to these, or, as soon as I see an angry sentence, I'm going to tear it up and throw it in the wastebasket.
Yeah.
And they stopped. But there's something about, I think, not just the fact that it was a news talk station, but, and people listen to it all day long, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which a lot of people still do. But there's the audience is just so fiercely protective, and they do not like change of any kind.
No. And when we went over, I got a similar letter to the one that Terry got. Might even have been the same person, because the handwriting was also very impressive penmanship. I do still, and have for many years, a bit called Revisionist History, where I'll take an event in history and then I'll put a funny spin on it. And I brought that over to CJAD. And one morning I did a joke about the Battle of Verdun, which was a famous battle in World War I. And I said on this date in 1915, the Battle of Verdun was canceled when the Germans took the wrong exit off of Highway 15 before they got to the Champlain Bridge or something. A joke about Verdun, Quebec,
Ended up
right?
on De La Verande.
Exactly, yeah. So, fast forward a week or however much later it was, and I get the same sort of envelope Terry got with the impressive handwriting and stuff, and I opened up, and it was a woman telling me that my Battle of Verdun joke was not funny and was in extremely poor taste and personally offensive to her because her husband fought at the Battle of Verdun.
Which was 1915,
I think. Yeah. So, or 16.
Yeah.
So it was an older crowd.
Yes.
That's for sure.
No disrespect intended to the veterans of WWL.
No, none whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's, to me it was this, it's similar joke to December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Bailey. I understand that it's, it was a terrible incident and everything like that. But John Moore, our great and good friend and former colleague, always says, death plus time equals humor.
There you go.
But imagine the husband surviving World War I, going through all of that, but yet his wife is still the one that kills him. That bitch Agnes. Imagine, just like, the man went through everything, and yet it was her.
Yeah, survived the great slaughterhouse of WW1, but then he had to come home to Agnes. Yeah.
While we're talking about it, I want to pay tribute to Thumbs Repaw, who was if you're a CJAD listener, that name would ring a bell. Glenn Repaw was known as Thumbs. George Balkan gave him that nickname, and he was such a massive help to me, and that was in the days before technology that Poseidon is sitting in front of. Everything was analog, and he had to, make sure, the news got on time, the helicopter.
It was almost like playing a piano.
Yeah.
There were so many buttons to push, and you had to employ all your fingers.
Yeah, and nobody did it better than he did, and he was very, very supportive to me, and I couldn't have made it through that without without his support. He was really excited to have, a fresh face and a new start because he had been working at CJAD for a long, long time. And I don't, a lot of people think I regretted being there, but I didn't. I really enjoyed my time there. Did you, Ted?
I did, yeah. And it was, it was another format to conquer, kind of thing. So it was enjoyable, and we did have some fun there, and we did have some laughs. Yeah. And one of them was at my expense, and I was perfectly fine with it during the birthday announcements one morning.
Yes, how did it go though? I thought it was. In my mind, it was you that pulled the gag on me.
No, it was
Thumbs?
No, I think it was Blair. It was our friend Blair Bartram. Right. Yeah, who put in he put in the pile of birthday wishes every morning at 7:15 or whatever. We would wish happy birthday to whoever, people would send in their birthday wishes for their friends, relatives, whatever. And so these guys one morning they put in the name Asheed Mapans, Asheed, last name Mapans, Mahpans, and they hand it to me.
But I wasn't in on it.
You weren't, eh?
No.
But you got it. I didn't. I didn't get it. I read it. I said, and happy birthday to Asheed Mapans. And Terry fucking lost it. And I'm sitting there going, what's so funny?
No, but I think the way it went, as I remember it, you initially struggled with it. You
okay? That
you were
could
like,
well be.
And
I don't know how to pronounce this.
A happy birthday to Bert Lar, and a happy birthday to Kevin from NDG, and here's a birthday wish for Asheed Mapans. Asheed Mapans. Happy birthday! And it clicked. It dawned on me that
it didn't click with me at all.
You had been at.
Yeah.
People ask me all the time about swearing on the air, and one morning there was a little in front of you when you sat at the broadcast table in the studio. There's a little box, and on that box was it was a 2-button box, and one button was red and one button was white. You hit the red button, you were on the radio. You hit the white button, you were off the radio. And I came in one morning, and the red button wasn't working. I would push it, and nothing would happen. And I was there early enough, I thought, I'll fix it. And as you're very aware, I'm quite handy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, very, very handy. The guys used to joke that at my house, I had a toolbox, and inside the toolbox was a checkbook and the yellow pages. And I began to fart around with this switch with a screwdriver. I don't know what I thought I was doing. And I was getting really, really frustrated. And I couldn't get this microphone button to go down. And if I didn't, we were going to have to call engineers in at 5:30 in the morning. And just as the show was about to start, I managed to get the screwdriver to get the button down and jammed my finger at the same time and went, fuck! And I guess I was lucky in some ways that
it was 5 in the morning or whatever.
It was 5:30 in the morning. But I think I handled it properly because I went on the air and I told the story and I apologized.
Right.
And there wasn't, because I thought that was going to lead to an avalanche of calls for my job. I think today it may have led to my dismissal. When you think about the fury that could have been created on social media.
Yeah, but it was an honest mistake, and you didn't insult or offend any marginalized groups, so I think you would have been okay.
If you happen to listen to us in our old jobs years ago, you know that Ted and I have been speaking on the Merson's behalf for quite a long time. So it won't surprise you to know that our good friends at the Mersons were immediate supporters of the Standing By podcast, and it's nice to have them along, Ted.
It sure is, and I have no problem whatsoever speaking on behalf of the Mersons because I've seen them in action and I know that they operate in a business where not everybody's above board. They are always above board and honest. And the way I know that is from my experiences in their waiting room, waiting for my car, and they come out, and whether they're addressing me or another client, it's always they explain what's happening with the car, and they don't tell you just what you need. They'll tell you what you don't need. They'll tell you you've got 10,000 kilometers left on your winter tires, or you've got 5,000 kilometers left on your brakes. They give you a heads up. It's not a hard sell. It's not the, well, if you don't fix those brakes right now, you'll probably drive right off the bridge on the way home. That's how you keep customers coming back for 3 generations. You treat them honestly, and you treat them like they've got a brain, and that's what the Mersons do.
And that's why you'll see new generations of families at the Mersons. I've been in the waiting room and heard people say to the people at the counter, my dad brought his car here for years, and now I'm bringing my car here for safety for my family too. It's the way you build a business that's as strong as the Mersons, with integrity and honesty. And that's why we've got no problem telling you that if you visit the Mersons, you will love the way they look after you. Call them at 487-5545 or visit them online at mersonauto.com.
My wife at the time, Danielle, dropped the F-bomb one morning, and I've got this on my phone. It's too bad I can't find my phone. I think I left it in the car. We phoned her one morning. You remember we used to call her, right, and get her on the air, and it was usually pretty funny.
She had a great sense of
humor.
humor.
Good sense of humor, yeah. And so this was after you had gone to Calgary, and I was working with Rob Kemp. And one morning, the boys' school was canceled because there was a water main break at their school. So Charlie's school was canceled. So we had to call. We thought, let's call Danielle and tell her that Charlie has no school today.
On the air.
Yeah, and this was at the end of March break, so she had it with the kids being home. Allie was just born, so she's got a little baby, maybe 6 months old. And so we call on the air, and Charlie answers the phone. And he's, at this point, he's like, I don't know, he's 4 or 5. So I guess it was his daycare, his pre-K that had the broken water main. So he answers the phone. Hi, Dad. And we talk to him. And unbeknownst to us, Danielle has picked up the extension, but she's picked it up not realizing that she's on the radio, right? So I said, Charlie, do you know you don't have any school today? And your Danielle go, oh, you're fucking kidding me. And then we were like, Dad, no, we're on the air. And you know what? The reaction to that,
right,
far from being people complaining, was, man, can I ever relate to that?
Yeah.
Because it was an honest mistake, and it was something that was very relatable.
We should mention a lot of radio programs, and I think the majority of radio programs worked on tape. Everybody, a lot of morning shows were afraid to go on the air live, and I never understood that, because to me, the joy of being on the radio,
it's the magic,
is the high wire act.
Yeah.
I used to say we're working without a net, right? We would phone people live on the air, like when we did wake up calls or birthday wishes or contests, whatever it was. We always went to the phone live, knowing that anything could happen, and then you would have to react to that in the moment. And I thought it kept us sharp. Maybe it didn't.
I think so.
I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Well, and it also, I like the fact that it always allowed the listener to be the star as well.
Yeah.
It allowed the listener to shine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was an era too where we worked with, it was a great, I think, privilege to work with guys from an era that has long since passed. When I think of, like Gordon Sinclair from, really a legendary family. His father was a big deal in Toronto. If you remember a show called Front Page Challenge,
right,
his dad was on that. And Gord Sinclair owned a radio station on the West Island called CFox, and was an old school journalist who had quite a big reputation in the business and quite a big booming voice, as you recall.
I'm Gord Sinclair. On a day that's sunny, cloudy, windy, breezy, rainy, dopey, snow, grumpy, sneezy, and dark.
What do you think's going to become of News Talk Radio, Ted?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think it seems to me that the medium in general is on the wane. I think that digital media has changed the landscape enormously. Yeah. And I know that some old school radio people would say, yeah, when TV came along, they said it'd be the death of radio, and it wasn't. But I think this is different.
Yeah.
I really do. And I also, as we've seen over the course of our careers, most radio stations now are corporate owned, and they're not run by radio people, and the decisions aren't made by radio people. The decisions are made by MBAs and CAs who don't know and frankly don't care about the product and are more interested in the bottom line and the share price. So I think that as the quality of radio declines, which I think is happening, listenership will decline and revenues will decline, and I don't think it'll ever be dead.
No,
but I don't see it. I don't see a bright future unless there's some fundamental and earth-shaking change, and I don't see where that would come. It would have to be in ownership.
Yeah,
it would have to be a change. It would have to kind of revert back to what it was when you and I were in our heyday. The radio stations were owned by families. Most of the stations in the country were owned by the Slate family or the Waters family. I think there were a couple of families out west as well.
There were, yeah.
And they were broadcasters. They were professional broadcasters.
Right.
So they understood that there were two components. There was the business component and the creative component, and that they were complementary and that they fed each other. And so they would put equal onus on the product as well as on the business end of it. And I think that was smart, and I think that it worked well. But then when those families sold to major corporations, everything changed. The landscape changed.
Yeah, I think it's even happening in, like the movie business, right? Movies get made now because they work on a worldwide market. And that's why there's so many movies about comic books. The comic book movies are all done by corporations in order to...
I assume they're a big seller in China.
Big time.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
That's exactly what happens. And there, I don't know if I was talking about this in episodes previous, but this is one of the wonderful things about being able to do what we're doing now in this environment here.
It's such a great opportunity, and I don't want to sound like, old guy, the radio's dead, and I don't want to sound crabby and bitter, because I'm not. I'm very grateful for the run that we had, and even more grateful that now we have this opportunity to continue to do what we do, only do it on a new platform and in a new milieu. Yeah,
we were able to, I was telling Poseidon this yesterday, able to conceive an idea, and an hour and a half later, look at the end result of that idea. That's the kind of creativity that I haven't experienced in the last 10 or 12 years.
Yeah, and we're also lucky that we've got some support from folks who we've known and been involved with for a long time. Our title sponsor on this podcast is Jaguar Land Rover Laval, and Nino and Renato Di Cubelis, and their marketing director Adrienne McGrath is the biggest Terry and Ted cheerleader of all.
Big time.
God love her. And she gave us a beautiful, beautiful Land Rover Defender to drive around for the weekend while we're in between recording these podcasts. And I'm telling you, this vehicle is unbelievable. The Defender used to be the one you would see in the Tarzan movies, right? Yes. It was the old school go through the jungle Land Rover. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was not like luxury was not one of the components, right? But it is now. It still has that off-road capability, but it's also a beautiful luxury vehicle, and it's big. It's a big SUV, but it has so much technology on it now that I realize driving it and parking it, it's easier to park than my car, which is about half the size because of all the cameras and sensors and everything that you have. And I'm thinking about taking a course to get my Class 1 license, which is for tractor trailers. Wow. And if I can park this thing, and you know what? I'm sure the big trucks have all the new ones probably have all of that technology and more now.
And what was impressive to me was when Ted picked me up this morning, he figured out how to make the phone go through the.
I did. I figured out. I figured out how to play the music off my phone through the sound system. Yeah. And it's not that it's complicated, but there's just so much technology now that you really have to take some time it's still the same when it comes to, okay, you put it in drive and hit the gas pedal and that's how it goes. But to learn all of the, or figure out all of the extras, because there are so many of them. But it's a beautiful, beautiful vehicle that you can see at Land Rover Jaguar Laval. They also have McLarens up there, so I'm thinking that maybe when we take this thing back, maybe they'll give us a McLaren to take out for the weekend, next weekend. Tara, what do you think?
As I like to say, that's highly Selassie.
Yeah. What do you think about giving us a McLaren, Adrian? Hello. Hello.
We should. I'd like to wrap up the episode just to clarify something, and that is, a lot of people ask me why I left the chair at CJAD. A lot of people assumed I was removed from that chair, and I wasn't. I was very, very, very happy there, and as we've been referring to a number of times. The Slate family owned CJAD. There was Alan Slate, the man who founded the Slate companies, and his son Gary. And Alan, the dad, loved CJAD, and he loved the other one he owned in Toronto, CFRB. And Gary told me his father considered those two radio stations jewels in the crown at Standard Radio, and that he was very proud to have me in the chair as a new generation morning man. But they bought CHOM, and for the first time in radio history, I think, I could be wrong, but for the first time, a company in Canada was allowed to own 3 radio stations. So that was groundbreaking, because years ago, you were only allowed to own 1 AM, 1 FM, and 1 television station.
In a single market.
In a single market. So in Toronto, I think the Slates owned CFRB,
CKFM,
and CKFM. And in Montreal, they owned CJAD and Mix 96. And then they made a bid to buy CHOM, and the government gave them permission to buy CHOM, so that they now own 3 radio stations. The government has since abdicated that responsibility, because now the big companies...
Now you can own as many as you want?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want and control the market. Yeah. But back in that day, that was really quite something. And Gary flew into Montreal and told me I was more than welcome to stay. That if I wanted to stay at CJAD, and I was happy at CJAD, they were pleased and proud to have me. He said, but with your history at CHOM, I think you and Ted could really, really do well for us at CHOM, and we could certainly make a lot more money with you. He was honest about it. If you guys were to return to CHOM, and I think that would be the right move.
He didn't really say you and Ted. He just said to Terry. He just said you. No. But every time Terry made a move at Gary Slate's request, he needed someone to carry his bags. So that's where I came in.
He did the right thing. As a matter of fact, a radio executive who was a good friend of ours said, if CHOM had been smart when I came back from Calgary, they would have phoned you and put us back together.
Well, that's a whole other story. There was too much pride and too many egos at play on both sides of the fence there.
Anyway, I had this lunch. Gary flew in and gave me the story and told me my options and told me I take a couple of days and think about it.
See, I didn't get invited to the lunch.
Nope. and he left town. He flew in to town just to have lunch with me and then left town that day. And I was at home pondering what I should do. And I spoke to a friend of mine who was a lawyer. And I said, Gary flew in today and told him the story. And he said, there was a long silence on the other end of the phone. And he said, okay, let me see if I got this straight. The owner of the company flew in and told you he'd like you to go work at CHOM. I said, yeah. He said, and what is your issue? He said, it's pretty clear what you have to do. The owner wants you to go work at CHOM. Are you stupid? I went, oh, Yeah, I guess, yeah, you're probably right. He goes, yeah. He said, he's asking you out of decency and respect.
Yeah.
But if you look around the edges, he's telling you that's where he needs you.
Yeah.
That's where you're going to go. And that's how I ended up back at CHOM. And that's when we started our second run there, I think, correct?
Yep. Second run, it was a 5-year run.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. The end?
Well, for now, yeah, we can talk about the second run when we come back. But right now, I have to pee.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I know. I should have thought of that before we left.
Oh, Grandpa, come on. I'm not stopping this car. Should have brought a jar, Birdman.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, well, it's. I guess we're at that point in our lives where the reason you end the podcast is because one of the hosts has to pee.
That doesn't happen to you guys, does it, Poseidon?
Never seen
Sometimes. Depends what you drank.
Yeah, I guess, eh?
All right.
Well, that's an extra large coffee,
It is.
so.
All right, well, you better run, Birdman.
All right, then.
Standing by, the Terry and Ted podcast is sponsored by Jaguar Land Rover Laval, because you're probably going to move up north at some point anyway, so you might as well drive a Land Rover and fit in.